Chapter 15, Aftermath. The destruction of the very last of the lineage of the royal house of Greece was complete. After going through so much past misery with all its trials and hardships, they would have obtained happy peace if fortune had allowed it. And so, no one should depend on worldly prosperity, for it fails when it is most unexpected. When the princess had passed on from this life, the wailing and crying in the palace was so loud that it echoed throughout the entire city, and the heartache felt for Trnt and the emperor was renewed and redoubled. The poor empress fell into such a deep faint that the doctors could not revive her, and Hippolytus beat his head in his face, believing that she was dead. Finally, with all the remedies they tried, after more than an hour, she seemed to awaken slightly. Hippolytus remained steadfast at her side in great anguish, rubbing her wrists and wetting her face with rose water. When she regained consciousness, they picked her up in their arms and carried her to her chamber, putting her on the bed. Hippolytus was always at her side, comforting her and kissing her often to bring to mind the love they had continually had for each other. The empress loved him more than her daughter and herself because of the great kindness and gentleness she had found in Hippolytus, who had always obeyed her in every wish. And don't think that at that moment Hippolytus was feeling great pain, for as soon as Trnt was dead, he realized that he would be emperor, especially after the death of the emperor and his daughter, for he had great confidence in the love that the empress had for him. Putting aside all shame, she would take him as her husband. After the empress had spoken a short while with Hippolytus, and their pain had been somewhat alleviated with kisses, she said to him, "My son and my lord, I beg you, as lord here, to order funerals held for the emperor, my daughter, and Trnt, so that afterwards your desire and mine can be carried out." When Hippolytus heard such loving words, he kissed her hand and her mouth, and said that he would do everything her majesty commanded. Hippolytus went to the princess's chamber where the three bodies were lying, and on behalf of the empress he ordered them to take Trnt to a cenotaph in the church immediately, and it was quickly done. Then he ordered the surgeon to embalm the bodies of the emperor and the princess. Hippolytus had another cenotaph put up in the church of Saint Sophia, much more beautiful and higher than Trnt's, and he had the emperor's body brought to the cenotaph. He had the princess put in Trnt's bed on his right side. He ordered a proclamation read throughout the city that all those who wished to dress in mourning should go to a certain house in the city, and there mourning cloth would be given to men as well as to women. In the space of one day, everyone in the palace and the city and all the foreigners were dressed in mourning. In addition, Hippolytus decreed that all the clergy, friars, chaplains, and nuns, within 2 days' journey from Constantinople, should come to participate in the funerals of the dead, and 1,200 were counted. They decided that the burial should take place 2 weeks after the emperor's death, and all the barons of Greece were summoned so that they could be present for the emperor's funeral rites. Then he sent a message to King Escriano on behalf of himself and the empress, inviting him to come and honor the burial of the emperor and his daughter, and his dear friend and brother Trnt. For, since he had not been able to honor their wedding, he would be able to honor his burial. King Escriano sent word to him that he would do so, but that he had hoped to enter Constantinople with happier news, and he left for Constantinople with 100 knights. While the people were arriving, Hippolytus had the king of Sicily, the king of Fez, the duke of Macedonia, and the marquis of Lyons, and the viscount of Branches, and some others gather in a chamber. Then he said to them, "My lords and brothers, your lordships are not unaware of the great danger that has befallen us with the death of our father and lord Trnt. He expected to be emperor, and he would have ennobled and enriched all those of our lineage. Now that there is no hope of that, we must take counsel about what should be done. Your lordships realize that the entire empire is in the empress's power. Although she is advanced in years, some great lord will be very pleased to marry her, and he will find it very agreeable to be emperor. After her death, he will be the ruler, and he may treat foreigners, which is what we are, badly. I am of the opinion that we should make one of us emperor, and all of us should help him, and the one who is elected will enrich the others very well. Now, I beg you, let each of you give your opinion." Then the king of Sicily said that he felt it was a good idea that one of them should be made emperor, and that they should select whoever was willing. The king of Fez spoke, because he was the eldest of their line, and he said, "My lords and brothers, it seems to me good advice that one of us should be chosen emperor, but it is my opinion that we should follow the dictates of Trnt's will, then the princess's, and with those two wills we shall see who among us is indicated." Everyone agreed with what the king of Fez had said. They sent for the secretaries of Trnt and the emperor, and had the wills read. When they had them read, they made the secretaries leave the room, and the Duke of Macedonia spoke. "My lords and brothers, as I see it, our selection is very clear and cannot be disputed. I see that our good relative and lord leaves us as recipients to all the rights he has earned in the Greek Empire. I see that our good relative and lord leaves as recipient of all the rights he has earned in the Greek Empire, Hippolytus here. Further, I see that the princess has bestowed the entire empire on her mother. So from what I can see, there is no other action we can take, considering the friendship we all know Hippolytus has with the empress, than for him to take her as his wife. In that way he will become emperor, and he will keep each of us in our station, for he is our relative." Then the Marquis of Lausanne spoke. "Lords, I find the Duke of Macedonia's advice to be good, and praise it, for we all have wives, and furthermore, it is Trnt's command." All the rest praised him, and agreed that Hippolytus should be chosen emperor, and husband of the empress. When Hippolytus saw the gentility of his relatives, he praised them, and gave them many thanks for their great love. And he made a vow before God and Our Lady that if God grant him that he become emperor, he would repay them in such a way that they would all be very happy. And then they decided, after the funeral rites were held for the dead, that they would raise him to the status of emperor, and would hold the wedding for him and the empress. Trnt's relatives agreed, and the following night King Escriano entered Constantinople dressed in mourning with all his men. He was received with great honor by Hippolytus and his wife, the queen, who was very happy to see him. Hippolytus placed him in the emperor's palace, in a beautiful apartment. The king of Sicily, the king of Fez, the Duke of Macedonia, and many other knights came to see him, and a great celebration was held. After this, King Escriano took his leave of them, and taking the queen, his wife, by the hand, he went to Hippolytus to pay honor to the empress. When they were in her chamber, King Escriano bowed before the empress, and she warmly embraced him. She took him by the hand, and had him sit at her side. Then King Escriano said, "I left my land in order to help Trnt LeBlanc recover the empire, and the queen, my wife, came only to attend the wedding of my brother Trnt and the virtuous princess. Their death have made me both sad and angry. Now that they are gone, I am ready to serve you for the rest of my life." The empress hesitated, and then said softly, "It is great glory for me that so magnanimous a king should say such words to me. I thank you very much for coming, and even more for helping us put an end to this conquest. But with it I have lost the three of the best people in the world, and because of this, the rest of my life will be filled with sadness." The empress could speak no more, and tears sprang from her eyes. King Escriano began to cry. That night Hippolytus went to sleep with the empress, and he told her about his conversation with his relatives, and what they'd all decided. "That I should take you as my wife, my lady. I know that I am not worthy of being your husband, or even your servant, but I trust in your highness's love and virtue, and I hope that you will accept me as your majesty's captive. And trust me, my lady, to do well. I will be so obedient to you that you can command me more than ever before, for I never wanted anything but to serve you." The empress answered, "Hippolytus, my son, you know how much I love you, and will be very pleased if you will take me as your wife. But remember, my son and lord, even though I'm old, you will never find anyone who loves you as much as I do." Then Hippolytus knelt to kiss her hands and feet, but she lifted him up and embraced him and kissed him. And they spent that delicious night with little thought about those who were lying on the cenotaphs for burial. In the morning, before Phoebus had spread its shiny rays over the earth, the knight got up, full of new joy, for that night Hippolytus had entertained his lady very well. He arranged everything that was necessary for the burial. On the appointed day, all the barons and knights who were invited went to the city of Constantinople. On the first day, they buried the emperor with the most beautiful sacramental lights ever given to a prince. To exalt the occasion, there were many kings, dukes, counts, and marquises, and many noble knights. All the people from the city were there, lamenting over their good lord, and the clergy performed the ceremony, singing so that they were all weeping. And on that day, the emperor's body was solely buried. The second day was reserved for the princess's burial, and the third for Trnt's. There was so much wailing and lamenting during those 3 days that no one felt like crying for the rest of the year. When the funeral rites for the emperor were over, the emperor's body was placed in a beautiful tomb, which the emperor had ordered made some time before. The bodies of Trnt and the princess were placed in a wooden coffin, for they had to be taken to Brittany. When this was done, the king of Sicily, the king of Fez, and the duke of Macedonia went to King Escriano and told him about the council they had held with Trnt's relatives, and how they had decided to raise Hippotlis to the status of emperor. King Escriano said, "I am very pleased by your decision. I think Hippotlis is a good and virtuous knight, and he deserves to be emperor."